Hey guys, welcome to All Leads Suck podcast. My name is Samvel.
I'm Lewis.
Dominic Felix.
All right, today we're going to interview our very good friend Dominic Felix. We decided that we're going to start these podcasts off by interviewing each one of us at each one of the podcasts before we start bringing in guests. I'm not going to get into any introductions or anything else. Let's just jump straight into questioning this man.
Let's go.
Yeah.
I'm
So,
ready.
okay, so tell us a little bit about yourself, Dom. How you became rich,
Mm-hmm.
how you got broke, and then how you became rich again, and then how you got with us.
Okay. Just to let everyone know and to let you guys know, you guys probably know this already, but when someone gets a question that they're not ready to answer, what they do is they say, you know what? That's a really great question. Glad you asked that question.
Okay.
And
I
I
might have.
appreciate you guys for having me on the show.
Uh-huh.
Once again, shout out to my mom, and that's all just buying time. I think
Yeah.
that's what I've
I mean,
always
it sounds good when you do it, though, right?
I might have
I've always
heard
thought,
it
I was like,
somewhere.
this motherfucker doesn't have a quick answer. Shit. All right. So we're trying to keep this condensed down into about an hour.
Yep.
Mhm.
So I do have long versions of my stories.
Let's go with short versions then.
So essentially, initially, when I really had no initial desire to be an entrepreneur or to go into business myself. I mean, everyone has that as an underlying dream, I think.
Right.
Oh, I wish I had my own business, my own bar, hang out with my buddy, whatever the case may
Do
be.
whatever I want.
But I was working in a call center for Citigroup, and I was there for about 7 years, and I was making about 70 to 80 grand a year
Yep.
doing retention sales, right? And I was comfortable. I was happy. And but I felt like I hit my ceiling, right?
Okay.
So I felt like there's two directions to go, right? I can either find some other opportunity somewhere else, or if I wanted to grow inside of that corporation, if I wanted to become like a unit manager or an assistant manager, I would have had to take a deduction in pay to start on a different path. So I kind of grew into maximizing frontline roles. And I think that's the highest paying frontline role, like where you're actually on the phones talking to people, doing the frontline actions. And if I was going to be like an assistant manager and then a unit manager, I would have went back down to maybe like 35 grand, 40 grand. And then I would have to go on to operations manager and then grow up like that corporate realm. And I didn't really want to take that pay cut. That was my initial thought. And then what I thought was like, it'd be really kind of cool to be a firefighter, right? My whole
Okay.
life I thought about it. People admire them, people love them. And I'm like, shit, that still is an aggressive pay deduction. But I kind of really wanted to do it. I wanted to try it.
I gotta pause you for a second.
Okay.
Who goes from
I
retention
was thinking the
sales
same thing.
to being a firefighter? That
Yeah.
sounds
I
ridiculous.
don't know who does it because I didn't even do it. Um, but it's so basically I grew up in Brooklyn, New York, and city jobs there were really highly admired. Police officers, firefighters. So that's kind of always been in the back of my mind off of like positions that are admired by like direct friends, families, things like that. So I didn't really have a full out thought on all of my options and my opportunities. It was kind of one of the things that were automatic in my lifestyle, and there was like a guy like one row over in the call center that just started fire school, and he was going on, and I was like, shit, I kind of really want to do that. And then I talked to my wife, I made a full on decision that I'm going to try it out. But if I was going to become a firefighter, I would have taken more than half of a salary pay cut because
Mm.
in Jacksonville firefighters are making 30 grand a
Oh,
year.
wow.
And then I thought to myself, shit, well, how am I going to make that happen and not suffer, all of that loss in income? So I said, I'm gonna start a side gig, like a little side job, because when you become a firefighter in Jacksonville, or at least at that time, it was like 24 on, 48 off was the shift, right? You go and you work one full 24-hour shift, and then you're off for 48 hours straight.
Mhm.
Can you
Then
just work the shifts at night? So could you just be a firefighter and you only work the nights and then you
no,
sleep and they
because
just call you in?
you could try. I don't think it'd work though, because the 24-hour shift is you start at midnight
Okay.
and then you work 24 hours around the clock till the next midnight, right? So
Okay.
you're working 24 hours straight. So you are like
Do you get an 8 hour?
eating there, sleeping there, working out,
Yeah.
going to calls, but you're there for 24 hours straight.
Yeah.
and then 48 hours straight off. And that's how the rotation was, at least at that time. And I said, I think I can start a side business to make up the loss,
Right.
and I can prepare for it because I had to go to fire school. I had like a year before my option to get hired would come if I started this path, right? So I did a lot of things simultaneously, right? So my wife agreed. I enrolled in fire school. And then one thing I was totally blind from that I should have automatically I just wanted to go and chill in the fire department, hang out, work out, go to fire calls when they came up, save lives, look like a hero, be a cool freaking firefighter dude.
Right.
I didn't really think too much about the medical side of it. Like that's
Okay.
enormous, and it's probably by far majority of the calls that go in your
Car
direction are
accidents and
mostly
things
all
like that.
medical. And in fact, they had different units, right? So they had like the ladder, which is the truck that goes out and deploys the large ladders. They have the rescue unit, which is kind of first to arrive and just start doing whatever has to be done to resolve the challenges. And then they have the oh no, that was the engine. And then the rescue unit is like the EMT and the you know, all the medical stuff, the medical calls and stuff goes out in the rescue unit, and the rescue unit was extremely high demand. And
Right.
that's what I wanted to do the absolute least. Anyway, so I started fire school. I had to also enroll into EMT classes to become a certified EMT. And then I started my small business. I started cutting grass. So, and I kept my full-time job,
Were you
right?
cutting grass on your own with like a small little lawnmower?
So, so you had a full-time job, a lawn cutting business. You're in EMT school and in fire school all at
And
the
in
same
fire
time.
school, and my
And you had
wife
a wife.
just got pregnant with my firstborn, and we were planning a wedding.
Baby on the way, mad bills to pay.
Yes, you
Gotcha.
already know.
I got
Yeah,
you.
yeah. So I had, like, those 6 or 7 major things going on in my life all at one time for that entire year. So for that entire year, I worked full-time in the call center. I'd get out early here and there
You know,
because of
like the
low
way I'm
volume.
picturing you right now is you have a lawnmower in your hands with a phone in one hand, the lawnmower in the other hand. You have a firefighter uniform and you're cutting someone's grass in
And
their
I'm
backyard.
breastfeeding a
And
baby.
you're breastfeeding a baby with the pills in your foot.
At the altar getting
Yeah.
married. Um, yeah, yeah, that was a very busy year. Actually, from that year and the next 3 to 4 years after that were the busiest years that I've ever had in my entire life.
Wow.
So, essentially what happened was I was working full time. I started the lawn maintenance company. I got enough clients in the lawn maintenance company in 7 weeks to replace my entire salary in the call center.
What were you
However,
what were you doing to get those clients?
I was just talking to everyone that I know, and then all of the lawns that I was cutting, I was just talking to all the neighbors. I was walking neighborhoods, knocking doors, and dude, I mean, it wasn't hard to get a
Like,
lot of clients, and in fact, people would run up to my truck a lot also.
so were you
I
doing
guess because, like, the business out there is shit, like,
right.
people have no business acumen and,
Right.
no true high level of customer service, so it wasn't difficult for me to get clients and to retain
So
clients.
were you doing like the horseshoe method where you'd hit a house and then you hit the ones next to it and then the 3 across the street, or were you just hitting the whole street
I mean, I
afterwards?
didn't know what the method was, I just
Right.
went ham. You know the
Okay.
ham
Yeah, yeah,
method?
yeah, yeah,
The
yeah,
ham
yeah, yeah.
method where you just go crazy and do whatever you
Yeah.
gotta do to get shit done?
Okay.
That's probably the method. Is that the
Okay.
same as horseshoe?
No, but I mean, I know what you're talking about. Yeah,
The
you just
shoe
take it.
horse.
Yeah,
It's
you
the
just take
shoe
it as far as
horse.
you can. It's a racehorse.
Yeah, yeah. So I was, alright, so I was working the call center, all the time off I had, I was cutting lawns,
Yep.
and I was going firefighter classes when I had to, EMT classes when I had to, and I was just making it happen. So, like, for that year straight, or where I was at was, like, in the first 7 weeks, I got enough clients to replace my full-time job, but I didn't. I kept it. I just needed to make sure, like, everything was going into the direction that I wanted to go in, right? So let's fast forward about a year, right? So right before I graduated fire school, Jacksonville released a notice that hiring firefighters is going on freeze for an indefinite amount of time.
Hell yeah.
So I graduated fire school and I became a certified EMT. So here I am, like
Jobless.
a certified firefighter, certified EMT with no job in any of those realms. And I didn't want to go become an EMT.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
had no desire to be in the medical field. Like,
yeah.
It
in
sounds
fact,
like
if I
the
did get on, I want to do what I can do to be like on the engine or the ladder or something. Probably not ladder either because I'm deathly afraid of heights. So firefighter probably wasn't a great career
Yeah.
path
You
to
didn't
begin
think
with.
that through all the way, huh? You just wanted
Uh,
to be the hero.
I would have done it. You know what would have happened? I would have done a change, and I would have done it for a good handful of
Yeah.
years. I would have probably went into supervisor management and eventually gotten out of a lot of the frontline work
Yeah.
because I'm always looking for progression.
Right.
Right.
It sounds like you were Jordan Belfort on the day he got his stockbroker's license, and then the market crashed.
Okay.
And then you remember that part in the movie?
Uh,
So he gets his license, he gets hired in a
oh
big firm,
yeah.
and then it's the Black Monday and the
Yes,
market
yes, yes,
crashes.
yes. He walks in and
So
then
that day they freeze hiring firefighters.
yep.
So what's your next move? You go selling pink
So I
sheet
had
stocks?
already grown the company to start to be pretty large, and I had 2 crews because now I'm fast forwarding past a lot of the story, right? So
Okay.
I've got a couple of crews running, and what I started to do is I started to get subcontract work with someone that had contracts with banks to start maintaining bank-owned properties. But I was really just cutting the grass for those properties, right? So what happened was this person had a contract with these national companies that worked with all the banks. They subcontracted the work to me. My payable was higher than my residential customers, and that person was taking a cut,
Mm-hmm.
and the results would go back to the national company. So I'm like, this is so much easier than handling residential clients. I'm getting paid more, and I'm getting a cut of what this person is getting paid, and this person that I was subcontracting work from was not very bright at all. I
Mm-hmm.
don't even know how she established any type of relationship like that.
Right.
So then, obviously, I've always got my eyes open, right? Looking for the next thing and seeing opportunity when it comes along. So I told myself, man, I've got to go direct. I've got to go direct to these national companies because what happens is banks like Chase, Citigroup, Wells Fargo, what they do to maintain their foreclosures or their inventory is they go to national companies that have a vendor base that can cover the entire country no matter where they have a property. Could be in the 5 boroughs in Manhattan, could be in Alaska, could be in Hawaii. Like those national companies, it's their job to take care of the maintenance no matter where it is. Then they have to just maintain 1 or 2 vendors, not a vendor base of thousands
Right.
of boots on the ground, right? So I had to go through these national companies. So essentially, it was the bank, the national, this person that I subcontracted from, and then me. It
Right.
was like a 4-way sub to get that work order done. Isn't that crazy?
Yeah.
So I wanted to go at least direct to the national. And obviously, long term, you think about going direct to the banks and getting these national contracts, but that's another story. So I started really aggressively. There was like, I knew of just a few national companies, and later on, I got contracts with 11 of them. But it really took a lot of rigor, a lot of follow up, and a lot of luck, right? Because
Right.
I would find out who these individuals were, or at least the right contact parties. First, you have to find the company. Then you have to call as many numbers in that company that you can call. And then you get routed to certain departments that might be the right contact department because they're not advertising this for some reason. And then I narrow it down, and then I do a lot of phone calls, a lot of text messages, a lot of emails, just trying to get the attention and trying to get my foot in the door.
It's funny you said something that it takes a lot of luck to get this, but it doesn't sound like much luck was really involved in what you were doing. It sounds like a lot of hard work.
Well, what's the definition of luck?
Hard work.
No, luck is when preparation meets opportunity,
Okay.
and that's what luck is, right?
It sounds to
So
me someone just plugged you in and you cut out the plug
Uh,
and you went
it
direct.
that's where there
Essentially,
to
yeah.
where it got to because when I actually started getting in contact with the right people and started putting in my applications, then it's like, all right, you don't have all of these documents that you need and the right insurances and all this stuff. So now I've got to clean all that stuff up, give it back, and then just revisit and knock on doors for another couple of months. Keep showing up, keep ringing the phone, and then finally I got my first agreement.
Nice.
I got my first agreement. And then, we operated my next 3 years were literally my days were like this. They were 6 a.m. until 1 a.m., 7 days a week for the next 3 years in the row.
Wow.
And God bless my wife. She worked with me. She dealt with that. And we had our first child. So it was a pretty crazy few years, almost going out of business several times in a row.
Yeah.
But just showing up, things just ultimately worked out. Right.
Wow.
So we got to the point where in year 4 and 5, we started getting into the millions in revenue, because what I did was, instead of continuing to grow like my direct crews, because we got to the point where we had 4 crews just doing tremendous amounts of work orders.
Mhm.
We had friends noticing my growth, people that were handymen and lawn maintenance people and people that I knew, and they just wanted to figure out how to get a part of the action. And I would actually give them all the contact information. Here, go to these people. This is what I did. You go ahead and do it. And they couldn't get through the door.
Right.
They probably wasn't as persistent as
Not
I
enough
was.
luck.
They just couldn't get through the door. So I said, shit, let me call my contacts. Let me see if I can get work orders in your areas, because we were pretty much Northeast Florida, and I had a friend in Orlando. I had a friend in Palm Coast. So let me ask them, do they need help in those areas? Then I'll get the work orders to me. I'll subcontract them to you, and we'll split or whatever, because the payables were very considerable. Um, and I did, and so we did, right? And then what I did was, over the next few months, as I was giving people that I know work orders from the areas, the additional territories that we're able to get into, I just started measuring like my costs, my brain damage, all the work that it took, and the profit that I would get of my direct crews versus the vendors.
Right.
Dude, and it was almost dead the same. And it was so much less work managing the vendors, and it was way easier. I can get crews like this. I don't have to go buy a truck, put
Gas in, hire
to put a
employees.
trailer together, get equipment, do all this stuff, continue to check inventory. I could just give them a list. This is what all you need to have. Show me pictures, and let's give you a test work order, give you something small, see if I can trust you.
Yep.
Right. So then we just started getting on more and more vendors. We started advertising for vendors, getting on more vendors, and then we slowly just got rid of all of our direct in-house, and we just started working on just building a vendor base, right? So when we got into our 4th or 5th year, when we got into our 5th year, that was like our 5th and 6th year was our best 2 years, right? We had 120 field vendors that almost all of them worked exclusively for my company. We were in 7 states,
Wow.
and we had 30 house employees,
Wow.
and we were doing over 4 million a year. We were doing 5 million a year, pretty much right at 5 million a year
Is
for
that gross or net?
Gross. It's always gross.
That's gross. That's
Never
gross.
net.
We were keeping about 20%.
Okay.
Yeah, we were keeping about 20% when everything is said and done. And 30 house employees, and 30 in-house employees. And what it was it was a business that maintained foreclosed homes for banks, right? And we started it in May of 2007. So we had a good ride for a good handful of years, and then, we go to national these national meetups for our industry. I think it was called the NAMFS, National Association for Mortgage Field Services. And, they start talking about the recovery of the market and make your plans and all this and that. So what I thought was, I'm like, shit, I have a really great knack for recruiting vendors. We keep our scorecards incredibly high with our clients. They're always in the high 90s. Um, no one that I know, like, at these conferences were ever doing it at the level that I was doing it. Like, couldn't really find companies that I mean, there were probably a few. And what I did was, without knowing it, is I kind of built the regional level of this industry. So you have the national companies that used to go direct to the boots on the ground, and I kind of just plugged myself in the middle and took those work orders and subcontracted it and
Mhm.
took the results back and gave it back to the client. They held me to scorecards, so I held them to scorecards. I just basically looked at what they were doing and replicating it down the line. This way I can do my best to get the results as high as possible back to the clients.
Right.
And I would recruit vendors aggressively, because I mean, you guys know, the world is, no disrespect to anyone, the world is kind of shit, man. No one wants to work hard and put in a really strong work ethic. And if they do, they want to do it for a very short period of time, and they don't want to stay long-term consistent. So I would periodically get great people, and no one would really last long term. So I realized that, like, the vendor recruiting process had to be just
Constant.
constant.
That's
Constant.
that's
So, 30% of my company, of my in-house employees,
Right.
we called the recruiting department. There were there was about almost 10 people just there for recruiting vendors, following up on vendor work, hitting them on their scorecards, and just maintaining high quality, right? And, relieving vendors and hiring on new ones, relieving and just maintaining that recycling vendor base,
Right.
right? And I think that was the key for growth with that. It was, trying to maintain high quality and just the revolving vendor base in that industry.
So from
So
2007 to 2008, obviously 2008, the foreclosures increased.
mhm,
So that means your workload increased too.
workload increased.
So
Yep.
you started doing better in
Yeah, I mean,
2008.
it probably went to like 100,000 a year to 300,000 to 1,000,000 to 2,000,000 and then boom, 4,000,000, 5,000,000, right?
That was
And
in 08 and 09.
yeah, so it went like that into about 2010 to 2011,
Okay.
because right prior to that, throughout these industry meetups that we would go to, the annual meetups, is when they started saying, prepare your businesses for what's to come. So my preparation plan was like, I'm going to still recruit vendors like crazy. I'm going to go wider. And if I have to plateau and keep it even, I'll at least goal to do. I want to get bigger,
Right.
but my thing is like, if it offsets, I'll at least maybe just plateau.
Right.
Right. And I'll just cover more territory. Um, and what I didn't plan for, the big thing that I missed was the at this point, obviously, they don't put all their eggs in one basket, right? So even though I felt like I was this big king and savior with this monstrous company that was doing amazing fast path for growth, there were some other me's, but they were still going direct to the boots on the ground. They still had the nation covered. I was in 7 markets, right?
Right.
I covered about 3/4 of the entire state of Florida and about, half to 3/4 of the state of Tennessee. And I call that 2 territories, but there was a lot of other markets that I was in, maybe just a city or a handful of cities in that state and stuff like that, right? So they still had the entire nation covered,
Mm-hmm.
you know? So I didn't plan for them not needing me in other markets. My thought process was, I mean, my scorecards are incredibly high. Why not give me a shot? Why not plug me in here? And then all of the nationals were on the same trajectory of not really putting me in other territories. They've got it taken care of. They have all these people that they've been working for a while in these other areas. They're not going to put me in those territories.
Right.
And what happened in that case, because the economy started recovering really, really well and really fast, in my opinion, is the foreclosure inventory was going down like crazy. And it wasn't that we were doing bad, we were doing fantastic. But if they don't have the inventory, they can't give me the work.
Right.
And that's when you start having to release vendors and, the slow path of, laying off employees and then starting to think, all right, what the fuck am I going to do next?
It's like
Right.
you were backwards when everybody was,
I did great in a bad economy.
yeah,
Yeah.
everybody was doing like shit, and then you were doing really good.
Yeah.
And then as soon as everybody started doing well,
You
you're
start
like,
doing
okay, I gotta
bad.
fire everybody from my company.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And you know what kind of like confidence that gives you? When
Yeah.
the whole economy's in shit and you're like, "I'm
Uh,
doing fucking great. Get the
Yeah.
fuck up your ass and do something." I mean, I never
Yeah.
said that to anything, but that's probably like the underlying, little guy in your head just giving you so much confidence.
Yeah.
So I started basically from that point, what I did was I started a few other companies. So I was trying to look for the next thing. I said, okay, what do I have and what am I good at and what have I learned over these last few years? Well, I have a vendor base of handymen, essentially. What can I do with that? I didn't really want to get into property management too much. And to be honest, this first business, I didn't really like it even.
Right.
I just fell into
And
it.
you're making
And because I
money.
couldn't become a firefighter, I just ran that path.
Mad.
I
Um,
couldn't become a firefighter, so I decided to
Become a
cut lawns
landscaper.
nationwide.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was actually a wide assortment of all types of work. Anything that the house. So the idea was, all right, the bank has the asset now.
Right.
They don't want to. They don't
Maintain.
want to really improve it, but they don't want it to get worse than what it
Right.
already is. Right, maintain it at least in its current state, and try to do what you can to keep it safe and keep other people from being able to get in and keep it locked up. And if there's a window, keep the windows locked. If not, board them up or whatever, if the windows are missing, things like that. So, all right. So now I'm facing what do I have to do next?
Right.
Right? So I'm like, shit. All right. So one of the first things I did was I started the concept of a property management maintenance company. Because one thing that I did kind of know, not directly, kind of directly, kind of indirectly, was, one of the biggest thorns in a property manager's side is maintenance, right? Just things go wrong and they have vendors that they can't rely on.
Right.
So I wanted to start maybe like the option to take care of all of their maintenance through vendors. Just come through me. Don't go through all these people in and out, because, I know the pain. I know the pain point of trying to keep on good vendors, right? And I had that figured out. So, the difference between that is with the field services business, the income was considerable. On the property management side, they're always looking at cutting costs on behalf of their investors and their clients, right? It's really tough to make that work. I had my item list on things that I can do on their behalf. And I did do some work orders for property management company that started up. I saw a very long path, a very long, tough path that also might not work out. So another thing that wound up happening, because I had a bunch of rental properties, I started selling some of my rental properties. I wind up meeting an investor, right? An investor that had raised money from this dude that had a ton of capital. He was from the Netherlands, right? And apparently, this dude has so much money, he's investing here in building subdivisions, properties, and new builds, construction, and yeah, whatever the case may be. Um, I sold a couple of properties to them that they put in their portfolio that they were building.
How'd you get those properties that you sold them?
I just bought them over the years. I bought a property here, property there. I was
As
always
rentals?
as rentals. I was as rentals. I was always interested in real estate. Growing up, you own a house, you're the man. You own two houses, you're the fucking king.
Yeah,
Like,
for sure.
yeah. I mean, 75 to 90% of everyone I knew always rented.
Right.
What'd you buy those rentals for? Approximately. You don't have to give exact number.
I know
Shit,
you
I
bought
was in the
one.
hood.
You
I
bought
was in
one
the
for like
hood.
15 grand, right?
I'm just curious about like the times. So what years was it, and what
There's
was the price point?
properties, I think around 15,000 was the lowest that I
Right.
got some of them for,
What year?
and I paid as high as 50.
And what year?
This is right before I started, like maybe a year before I started the path on changing industries.
So
So
what is
like
it, 2000?
2009 to
Pro
11.
Probably 10 or 11.
10 or 11?
Yep, yep, yep. So some around anywhere from a range of 15,000 to 50,000,
Were you just paying cash or what were you doing?
just cash.
Yeah, that's what I figured.
Yeah.
Section 8.
Should you have kept those properties?
Probably.
How many did you accumulate?
21.
Okay.
21.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I used those for survival for the next couple of years because
For income.
You got cash out of them.
correct.
You
Correct.
got, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So I'm trying to think of what part I am at in this story.
You were
right.
unloading houses to the guy in the Netherlands.
Yes, yes, yes. So I sold maybe like 2 or 3 to him.
Okay.
And when you do transactions like that, you start to meet and learn people and learn where they're from and what they have to offer, what you have to offer, and you get into certain conversations. So he got into a conversation with me on why don't we start some type of maintenance warranty company, but not typically like the ones that are out there, because the ones that are out there would do, you can probably get a maintenance warranty on your electrical, on your plumbing, on your appliances and things like that, your roof, whatever the case may be. But he had a little bit of a wild idea on starting a program for everything else, just all the small fixes, right? Maybe fence, things go wrong with the fence, or uh, there's a leak under the sink, so it damages the cabinet, whatever the cabinet doors come loose, whatever the case may be. Pain points um, that investors have, when they're turning properties and all of that stuff. So what we started to do is we started to run numbers on large volumes of work orders. Not on my work orders because I wasn't really doing exactly that, but he had a very close connection with one of the biggest property management companies here in Jacksonville, Florida. It wasn't JWB, right? It was another very large property management company. So they were able to give me like work orders of portfolios of properties that I just kind of plugged into Excel, and I went through them and I started looking at work order types and ran averages, and I just started to try to figure out, if I was to offer a product like this, would it be profitable? And if it was going to be profitable, how and what the pricing would need to be. And we ran through the numbers and we got to a number that just made sense, and it would make sense to most investors. And it just gives them like a set measurable number that helps them just not go crazy, and it continues to help the assets to cash flow.
What
Right. And
was
it's
the
very
number?
sensible. I think it was 29.95 a month or something like that.
Wow, that seems almost
Really?
too cheap.
Something like that. I'd have to go and look at my notes.
But
I
it's
mean,
something cheap like that.
it was something relative to what a maintenance warranty company's numbers would be.
That's
So
very low. So
so
for each order, you
Well,
charge them like
yeah,
a trip fee or
it's
something
any
like that?
property you have enrolled, it's that property per month, whether there's maintenance or not.
American Home Shield is
And what
$600 for a platinum program.
Yeah, but that's for the year, and it's a large warranty company.
What's
And they
60
charge you
divide?
trip
What's
fees.
600 divided by 12?
I mean, 50.
Yeah, well, without digging into the weeds, because we can spend a long time on
Uh-huh.
that for sure. We started to work on that. And as I started to work on that for a handful of months, because we put it into play, I put my properties on it,
Right.
he put his properties on it, and then we were going to start to put other property portfolios on it. And it was a thing, right? And it would have been profitable, but it started to become more and more apparent as we started doing it that this is a very long-term play,
Right.
right? This is something that, I mean, we can go into it for years, and I needed to move. I had babies on the way, man, bills to pay. I'm making this adjustment. I'm leaving one industry, going to another. I have a team. I want to take care of them.
Right.
So I want to help them to transition. There's people on the team that I had with me that I felt like, I would wanna take this person on the long-term ride with me
Right.
because they just always had my back, and they started with, how that
It's
goes,
hard to
right?
find good working, trustworthy people.
So that didn't work out, or you know what, that it was working okay. So I had
Right.
both of those things going on. Property management maintenance company, maintenance warranty company, still had the field services company. And the investor that I actually met that I started doing that with before I partnered with was actually Gonzalo. So this is Gonzalo's relationship, was this
Mhm.
guy from the Netherlands that apparently grew up with the princess of the Netherlands. And he was always like at like these royal parties. And I mean, that's the type of money that this dude had. At least that's how it was apparent to me. And the dude gave Gonzalo $1 million to buy real estate with.
Dang.
Yeah. So it was pretty cool.
Yeah.
And then they really were buying properties cash, just, buying them up, buying them up.
Would he refi 'em or just keep all the cash in them?
The idea was to refi out.
Gotcha.
Yeah. Refi out, leverage, buy more.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. So I had those couple of companies, had my own company, and then I started, just spending a lot of time with Gonzalo because he was directly and indirectly a part of that project. It wasn't clear whether he was going to decide to be a part of that project or not. But he was basically the connector between me and this guy, right? Um, so just by hanging out with Gonzalo a bunch, we just started talking wholesale a bunch, and I was already very interested in wholesaling. One, because I learned about wholesaling a couple of years earlier, and I got into a transaction to try to buy a property from an individual investor. I didn't know it was a wholesaler, and I didn't know he was wholesaling me a property.
Mm.
What happened was I thought I was big and bad businessman, and I know how to read contracts. I know how everything works. I went to this property. I was going to buy it. He gave me the agreement. I felt like the price was pretty decent. I signed the agreement. I put in my 2K binder, And before close, I just started going back and forth to the property a lot more. I wound up getting a WDO inspection, and it wound up being like riddled with termites extremely badly. And I got very nervous just because I didn't have as much awareness as I have now. I
Right.
don't know if my decision would have been different or not.
Right.
I decided I wanted to back out. And then the wholesaler kept my binder. He actually split it with me. He actually gave me half of it back, which was awesome. And we all know this wholesaler in this market, so we'll talk about it after the show.
Oh, that's
Guys, comment in the comments if you
If you
guys
know
want to
who it
figure out
is.
who this wholesaler is. We might tell you. But he kept 50% of my binder.
Damn.
That's
And
not bad.
after that, it wasn't bad to me. It was like it
When'd you
sucked.
back out?
I felt like a violation of respect.
Yeah.
Like, because I wasn't used to the game.
Yeah.
Even though I bought real estate, I wasn't really in real estate.
It
I
was
wasn't
different.
networking. I
Yeah.
didn't know like all. I just wanted to buy in and hold properties.
What was when did you back out?
Probably just 4 or 5 days later.
From going under contract or from closing?
Yeah, I mean, I went under contract within 24 hours. Like I went there, I
Okay.
called them, sent me agreement, I looked at it, I signed like the next morning or
On a
something like that.
14 or 30?
I don't recall, honestly. I probably pull out the paperwork.
Well, I was just, figuring he's
Might have
probably
been a 14.
scrambling.
Yeah, it might have been a 14.
Yeah.
So yeah, so after that happened, I did a bunch of research on the contract, and I found like a little rabbit hole into wholesaling. And when I did all the research on wholesaling and I thought about growing it as a corporation, I said, shit, this can be extremely involved. Like a lot of people will go into wholesaling recklessly with high hopes and
Right.
not do very well
Right.
because it is a lot.
Why do you think they
Right?
do that?
Because of how it's portrayed on social media,
Okay.
right? It's
Like
portrayed
it's
to be
easy to
easy.
make $10,000-$20,000 a
Correct.
month. So
I mean,
get
they
it.
also have very strong desires. Real
Right.
estate is super attractive. It's made the most millionaires,
Yeah.
as far as we all know, and as far
Yeah.
as what's told to us.
Yeah.
And if you think, damn, I can do one transaction, I can make $10,000, that can change someone's life,
Oh yeah, for
right?
sure.
So everyone's on the path to solving that big problem on how to make those transactions easier, or at least easier for ourselves. And
Right.
we're on that same path. So I just told myself, I was like, shit, it's very attractive. I'm excited about it. But I saw all the moving parts and I'm like, damn, that would be a really big challenge into an industry that like I own real estate, but I really don't know if I was ready for that. So I didn't really take any action toward that. I started doing some of these other things that we've been talking about. Maybe trying to do things that are a little bit more relative to what I was already doing.
Right.
So that it can be an easier pivot. So once again, back to talking with Gonzalo. Gonzalo had already been wholesaling, I
Right.
think for a year or more,
Right.
but he's been wholesaling with another wholesale company, kind of as like their disposition agent. But he was doing like a hybrid of dispositions and acquisitions and boots on the ground. So he had like a lot of he's been a part of, I think, already 100 to 150 deals.
Right.
Playing various different parts. So he just had a lot of exposure to that. And I told him the story that I just told you guys about me getting locked up and I was really interested in the industry. So now there's another business that I started. I talked to Gonzalo, we proposed it to each other, and we decided yes to do it. So we dropped mailers, we got calls in,
Yep.
and in our first month, we closed 2 transactions.
Okay.
We acquired and closed 2 just Gonzalo and myself. So I had office space already.
Yeah.
So I had a separate office room that we decided to dedicate to the wholesale company, right?
Okay.
And yeah, so we did some mailer campaigns. The first one we did, we closed 2 deals.
How many mailers did you send out?
Not enough.
We sent out $700 worth of mailers and got 2 deals from it.
So what is that? About 1,400
I was
mailers?
just- probably.
1,500 mailers?
Back then,
They were a
14,
little bit
2,000.
more expensive.
50
They're
cents.
say $1 a mailer.
Oh,
A
wow.
buck.
Yeah, say about
Mm.
$1 a mailer.
Wow.
So
Yeah,
700 of them about.
yeah. So that return was ridiculous.
Yeah.
I mean, it was earlier in the game. Direct mail probably doesn't work quite the same right now.
Do you remember what your first assignment fee was?
The first assignment fee was $2K, and the second one was $14K.
Oh wow.
Yep. So
Boy.
$700 for like a $16,000
Yeah.
return.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
what happened was we started that business. We did that campaign. We did the mailers. G actually locked those two agreements up, and then we got them sold.
Nice.
I was a little bit more of like, systems, processes, being an advocate, shoulder to lean on.
You were an
Um,
operational guy.
when we did the contribution to the campaign for $700,
Right.
I was supposed to bring 350. He was supposed to bring 350. He bought 300, so I put the other 50 up, and until this day, we have this long-term joke that he's still never paid me back. So he still owes me, and he
Still owes you
refuses to.
$50.
He refuses to
Yeah.
because
But didn't you
he
say
thinks
that
it
he
would.
locked up the contracts and he sold them?
Yeah.
So why
Oh.
does he owe you? You actually should have put more money in.
I think that's an opinion.
Yeah.
Because I think I worked on developing the mail pieces and tracking the KPIs and the metrics.
Everybody's supposed to bring
Ah,
350. Everybody shows up with
we
350.
we yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
okay.
$50
Yeah,
here
yeah.
and there. It is what it is.
So
I'll keep notes here.
I probably worked on the email blast. There's a bunch of things that we
It's
worked
a
together.
perfect amount to be able to bust his balls, but not actually care.
Yeah. So the point I'm getting at with this part of the story is, as soon as that happened, I said, "Fuck, this is where I've got to
I'm
revert
done
all
with
my
everything
attention
else,
to."
yeah.
I mean, I'm working on all these long-term plays
Yeah.
that might not work out, and that just like proves something to me, like
Right. I get paid
immediately and as
today.
fast as possible.
It was get rich fast.
Um, More like get rich for sure. It felt like to me.
Okay.
Yeah. I know when you do these things on scale, there's loss of quality, right? And you always have to fight against that. But it's almost like, shit, I can make a hard pivot, put more time, energy, money into that, and do more transactions, just to do that hard pivot and really focus all the attention on that. Um, and said to myself, and I don't know, I don't remember exactly how long it took. Could have took a few days, few weeks, few months, a couple months or whatever before I did that really hard change. But I said to myself, listen, I know how to do a tremendous amount of small ticket transactions. So we did 60,000 maintenance work orders a year in our two busiest years, right?
Jeez.
So can I apply that concept to big ticket transactions, right?
Yeah.
I know how to put systems, processes. I learned how to hire people, retain people, manage people, whether it's encouragement or disciplinary action. I learned a lot of it because we did it for probably close to 8 or 10 years
Right.
inside of that company before I sold it to my operations manager.
Right.
So I just learned a tremendous amount. I'm like, shit, I want to apply all of that here. G's got the direct wholesale experience. I had the business building experience. So that's what we wind up doing. I wind up just shutting everything else down, moving some team members over to this new purpose, and really going all in on wholesaling.
Okay.
Yep. So then from that point, how are we doing on time?
I was just gonna say we might need a part 2.
Okay. So from that point, yeah, it was a
So
learning
I'm
experience.
curious as to those two deals that you guys got, the first two deals that you got. Did you end up selling them to that guy from the Netherlands and then most of the
No,
deals? No?
no, it was two separate buyers that G had on the buyers list that he had already built from being in wholesaling for so long.
Okay. And how long did you guys run the business as just the two of you before you started scaling it?
We hired people. I moved people over to
Right
it
away.
immediately
Yeah.
Really?
in month 2.
Really?
Yes.
Wow.
And
Yeah, one of the first things because G was very excited too. I mean, he's super young. He was probably like
Yeah.
19 or 20
Yeah.
at that time. And you make a few grand a month, you're stoked,
Yeah. Absolutely.
right? So you think you want to maybe bank it or retain it. And it was really my idea. I'm like, dude, we got to get people on payroll and we just got to work on doing more.
So what drew you to like lead generation then?
Like, so how do we divide it that way?
Well, I just know that it's something that was a little bit more your undertaking at Cash Geeks.
Right. Yeah. So I was over the marketing, the front end marketing, the acquisition sales team, and pretty much most of HR. We made a lot of decisions together also.
Mm-hmm.
That was really my HR, maybe project management as well, was
Mhm.
mostly under me. And then Gonzalo was dispositions, transaction coordination, and financials was more in Gonzalo's realm.
Right.
Um, so what drew me in that
Yeah,
direction?
like what drew you to lead generation rather than and marketing rather than to understanding the acquisition or the
I
dispo
think we
process
might have to
more?
actually. That's a great question. You guys have a lot of really good questions. No, no. We might have to come back to that because there was an evolution in there
Okay.
that blended us in those directions. Um, yeah, I mean, I think G's primary experience was mostly
Dispo.
disposition.
So you kind of just naturally had to figure out the other side in order to help?
I think what happens with me is I naturally gravitate to the areas where things have to be figured out.
Okay.
That makes sense?
Yeah. And so like when you did lead generation, what was the biggest difference you saw between doing lead generation for like a business that's business to business because you're doing REO for banks
Mhm.
and then business to consumer, right? Because now you're solving a motivated seller's problem is no longer a business making decisions off of P&L.
So once again, we're starting this new venture. We wanna go aggressive with it. We wanna build a really big company because of what we're capable of. And you're starting this whole new challenge, and the marketing and sales team was something I really had never done.
Right.
And I don't think G has done a whole lot of it. He has exposure to like the sales and the sales scripts and things that we've all seen on
Right.
social media. He's a lot more exposed to like social media and coaching in the influencing realm because he's been in it. But it was like fairly a new arena to us. So I think once again, I just gravitated into that direction because you want to get it all figured out. You want to dial into the metrics. You want to make sure you're being conservative. You're maximizing on dollars. Um, and once again, it just kind of evolved that way. It evolved that way over time. I wind up automatically because I was always involved a lot into the project management and putting things together and putting things in place. I think that's probably how I got involved in the marketing pieces.
Right.
Whether it's mail pieces or cold calling, it's like, all right, we have to adjust. We have to edit. How can we make it better? How can we get a better contact rate? Ringless voicemail drops, right? All right, we sent this message. Let's send another message. Let's try a girl's voice. Let her send the message. Oh, let's get Erica. Let my wife send a message. Maybe they'll like a little cute New York voice. Drop the voicemail. Trying all these things, narrowing it down to best performance. And then with the cold calling, when we first got into cold calling, it's like, all right, we have this guy's script, this guy's script. Let's try them both, right? All right, let's take the best parts, put them in. All right, we have these long scripts. They're 2-page scripts. Shit, why can't any VAs do it? Why are they all fucking up? Shit, it's too much for them. They're not salespeople,
Right.
right? We found out like 2 years in, we're putting too much on the VAs. More should go to the skilled people that can sniff out whether someone's serious enough or not, or whether they're skilled enough or not to truly nurture the individual.
And were you using those same tactics to get those bank contracts or are these
No,
completely different like
this
you
is complete no,
picked it up?
because in this new venture, it's putting all these pieces together like one big project, like one big Lego set, right?
Right.
And then, also I've never had experience um uh hiring and training sales individuals
Right.
and maintaining them, right? That was a whole nother monster, was incredibly challenging for me because in my old business, the mortgage field services business, there was no sales.
You were the
I
sales
was the
guy.
sales guy,
Gotcha.
and I just had to nab these big contracts. And then once I had them, we kind of had them. I mean, they weren't dedicated to us for any certain period of time, like 6 months, a year, or whatever.
Right.
But as long as you do a great job, you're going to be retained.
So one was essentially relationship based and the other one you had to really do outbound and inbound marketing to really bring your lead
Correct.
sources in
So then
essentially.
there was no marketing, and there was really no like hiring and managing salespeople. It
Okay.
was all front end coordinators, administrative work.
Right. Okay.
And then you're maintaining like these roughneck field people,
Right, right,
right?
right.
So yeah, entirely different. So in this company, like once again, first couple of years, pretty rough. Did decent, especially in comparison to like what we've seen around us. But you have points that start being questionable, like you know, are we going to go out of business? What do we need to get payroll taken care of? All this stuff until you start to see the light more and more. You start hiring better, choosing better people.
How many
Um,
times were you on the verge of bankruptcy?
Probably. Are you talking about like closing the doors on the businesses?
Sure.
I would say fucking probably 4 times on business 1
Yeah.
and 4 times on business 2.
Yeah. I mean, I think I remember Kyle telling a story at Yellowbird that like he had to buy a house. He had 114K, payroll was 118K, and he needed like 90K to buy a house too. And it was like, well, what do I do? Like, if I don't buy the house, I don't make money to continue to make payroll. So I think he said he like borrowed the money from his parents to like make payroll and buy the house and then make some money to keep things going. It's like,
That sounds like
it's always just
Elon
like,
Musk's story as well. Do you remember
yeah,
Elon Musk? Like he's borrowing money from Tesla to keep SpaceX
SpaceX.
afloat and
Yeah.
vice versa. And he's got rockets exploding, and he finally had to do this one test launch to try to land the federal contract, and everything went successful, and he wound up getting the $1 billion contract,
Right, right. It's
which
just like one step away always
yeah,
until
yeah,
you get to a certain point. And even then
that's like
you
the
could be, who was it, Baron Stearns, like you never know when something like that could happen. You're never really done.
exactly.
So you guys
It's like
started
3 feet from gold.
Right.
so you guys started the business for about 1 to 2 years. It was very rough, not the way that it was portrayed on social media.
Mhm.
You guys started figuring out lead generation and closing contracts and hiring salespeople and training them and so on and so
Yep,
forth.
yep,
And you've built up a really good team.
yep.
And I even remember one of the very first meetups I came to, like networking meetups.
Mhm.
I was chatting with Hayden and I kept questioning the business and like, what do you guys do and how you do it? And
Hayden came on much later.
right. So that was probably like your third or fourth year, probably your third year in the business.
Probably mid to late 3rd year.
Right. And my biggest question was, are you guys the biggest wholesaling company in Jacksonville? And he was like, yeah, I think so. And I'm like, are you sure you guys are the biggest wholesaling company? And he's like, yes, yes. And I just couldn't wrap my head around it,
Mhm.
or believe it, because I was like, so there's nobody better than these guys in this town. Um, and then um, basically towards the end of the market cycle, everything just started changing because everybody started getting laid off. All the wholesaling companies started going out of business, especially solopreneurs or
Mhm.
like people that were operating it as a side gig. So I'm curious as to what did the pivot do to you guys, and then how did you guys handle it?
Wait, wait. So, if you're talking about like when did you meet Hayden?
It was
Because that was
probably
a very good time.
2021, 2022,
Okay. So you're talking about when we're into year 5 almost. Four and a
probably.
half to year 5.
Probably.
So your question is what? What started happening around that time?
Correct.
And what were our ideas for pivot?
Because what happened was in your first business, you were doing really bad when the economy was doing really
You're doing
the vice
well.
versa.
You
You
were
were
doing
doing
well
really
when the
well when the
economy's bad.
economy was doing really bad.
Yeah.
And then the second business or the second large business that you launched, you were doing really, really well when the economy was doing really, really well.
Right.
So what happened when the economy started going bust?
So that was very challenging because you once again you have this beautiful operation that you
Right.
work really hard on for several years, right? You have people that you start to care of like essentially I don't really have a ton of friends outside of the people that I work with.
Right.
I really just get close with the people I work with. We're there for a purpose. We're all on the same team. We all have really great goals. And then I have my family. I do have other friends outside of that.
You
That's all
build your
fine and
tribe.
dandy. But I mean, where are you spending most of your time?
Yeah. Yeah.
At work.
Yeah. You build your
And
tribe.
I like to work. I get into business that it's my hobby. I like to do it. Not that I don't wanna go home to my wife and kids because I love them too, but if I didn't have a wife and kids, I probably wouldn't wanna leave,
Right.
honestly. The
Right.
shit is fun. The shit is cool. We're building something beautiful. You know
Right.
what I mean? So, yeah, yeah. So we just,
You enjoy the
we start having a lot of conversations. What are our options? What should we do? How does the income look like versus the expenses? You drill down into the books. You talk to your mentors. We're part of masterminds. So you talk to other companies, you talk to mentors, and you start to get told that you probably have to start making some really tough decisions, right?
Right.
So we had the option to, either so there were several options, right? So one of the options are you can keep it going and potentially lose everything. Try to pivot, right? And do what you can to do transactions a different way or make income a different way. You can adopt other strategies, coaching and, show people to do things in a way that they weren't ever exposed to before. Do layoffs, do light layoffs, do aggressive layoffs. So that's when it came to a certain point where, you know, I don't want to say we quite disagreed on things, but it was kind of like it started to go into the direction where, maybe we prefer doing things in a different way when times like this come up, right? So, we're both in it as owners and we're both in it, 100%, right? And the decisions that we make affect each other aggressively.
Mhm.
So I don't want to be reckless and say, let's keep everyone and fuck up his money,
Mhm.
right? But at the same time, anything that he's told me, I've trusted him. He's my best friend for years.
Right.
I wanna take that into consideration and be like, "You know what? It's likely that it's a smart decision to lay people off." And that's what we started initially. We did a light layoff, and then what you start to see is you start to see, like, mortgage companies laying off. So, I have a friend that was, he was an underwriter for, I think, Wells Fargo. And we can wrap this up and continue
Mhm.
it after this or whatever if you
Yeah.
guys want, but and I think the department he was in was like, ah, man, I'm gonna get these numbers wrong, but I wanna say it was like 75 people, and they laid off all but 3.
Damn.
So you start to hear stories like that. And then in masterminds that we're in, you have these people that are higher level than us, just laying off tremendous amounts of their underwriters and their what do you call the in-house brokers, the mortgage brokers? That yeah. So
LOs?
whatever those staff members are, yes,
Yeah.
whatever those staff members are called, just getting laid off left and right. And we're like, shit, the end user is the one that really keeps those people employed, right? And
Right.
it all trickles from the wholesale. You wholesale it to a flipper, flipper fixes it up. The end user uses the mortgage companies to buy the product.
Mhm.
So these motherfuckers are prepping for something.
Mhm.
So that's where we were with those decisions. So ultimately, the decisions were we did a light layoff, then we revisited, we talked, saw the market, talked with mentors, ultimately decided to do another aggressive
What were
layoff.
like the mentors you're talking about? What were they saying to you?
They literally blatantly said it's a good idea to lay off staff.
Mm.
Really?
Yes. Yes. So there was another guy in one of our mastermind meetups. He was a very active wholesaler in a different way because he also took down a lot of fix and flips and raised money and created portfolios and things like that. And he created an entire construction company for his cycle,
Mm.
right? And he was highly encouraged to lay off that entire part of his business, and he did.
Do we know that
Because
individual?
do I know him?
Do we?
Um,
Sounds like
I
a,
don't think so.
a
We
color.
can look through some profiles.
Okay. It
But
sounds like a
I don't
company
think so.
around here.
I think he's up in North Carolina.
Okay.
Yeah. So he was highly encouraged. Now, months later, after we made these decisions, in hindsight, I saw people make other decisions. Like there was another flipper that is, I would consider him a friend of mine. And I think he'd consider the same, although we've never gone out and had beers or anything like that. He had an entire uh, flipping cycle construction company, and he basically repurposed them just to
Mm.
do general construction work for others. It worked
Mhm.
out really well.
Yeah.
So there's always, I think, ways that you could pivot and change and adjust, regardless of what the people around you are saying. But we just made the tough decisions, and then it came down to the point where having to make these tough decisions, you always wonder in hindsight, like, are they the right decisions? Are they the wrong decisions? Could things have been done differently? And obviously, just like you guys have been partners for maybe close to a couple of years now, you
Mhm.
don't always agree with
Yeah.
each other, right?
Yeah.
But you try to figure out a happy median, or all right, I'm not right 100% of the time. We should probably go with your idea. You have to be a big enough person to be
Yeah.
able to say that, right? So, just it leaves you to be curious. So we had conversations and felt it was probably a good idea. Like if we were ever going to try something different, now is the market to do it in, right? So we agreed to do a sale of the company and I sold my part of the company over to G and I had plans to try a handful of other things out.
Right back to grinding again.
Yeah, yeah, in a different way.
Yeah.
It seems like you're making changes as more like big
As
shifts
markets
happen in the
changes.
market. So like
Yeah.
anytime there is a cycle, you ride the cycle, whether it's an upward cycle or a downward cycle, you just catch the trend and then you ride the cycle and then you're like, okay, now it's time to shift to
I
another
I
big
think
You
shift.
that's how a
know,
lot of people do it too. I
Which
think
is
they
good.
ride
It's
the
not a
wave.
bad. I'm not
Yeah.
saying it's a bad
no,
thing.
no,
Yeah.
I don't think that you are. I think, I think we have one life and with a high level of respect to G, I like the fact that you don't want to hold on to something until the bitter end and fucking lose everything,
Mhm.
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And it's kind of what I did the first time around. And it's kind of the direction that G led me into happily the second time around. There's probably a handful of other things that I might have wanted to implement to try things in a different way, but we agreed to not.
Yeah.
We agreed to do things the way that we did it,
Okay.
if that
Cool.
makes sense.
Cool.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, man.
Well, we probably need to do a part two
Yeah.
of this. It sounds like every one of our podcasts we need to do a part two of.
Yeah. I'm sure
Um,
we could spend
but
hours.
let's wrap this one up if you
Yeah,
don't mind.
yeah,
And then I feel like after the introduction and like people knowing our past and the histories and how we came together, it'll start making a little more sense when we start talking about lead generation and our individual strengths and then how we implement them in business today
yeah, for
in the
sure.
Yeah.
present.
Well, like I said, you guys have a lot of really good questions, and I really appreciate all of those questions.
And they were
Yeah.
all
So
great questions.
they're really
Yeah.
great, right?
Yeah. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we had the man, the legend, the myth, Dominic Felix. We didn't get to know his personal and private life today. They'll be in part two, so you have to keep watching, keep being tuned in. But my name is Sam Vell,
I'm Lewis.
And I'm Dom.
and this is All Lead Suck. See you guys next time.